In the mountains of Tennessee lies an ancient stone fortress built by people who shouldn't have existed in pre-Columbian America. Cherokee legends speak of the Mooneyed people, a tribe with pale skin, blue eyes, and extraordinary night vision who built underground cities before being driven out in ancient wars. When archaeologists excavated stone burial boxes from these ruins in the 1800s, they found skeletons with unusually large eye sockets and European facial features. Then, in 2012, DNA extracted from preserved teeth revealed shocking genetics. Markers matching ancient Wales and Norway, proving that Europeans lived in America centuries before Columbus. This is the story of Tennessee's lost tribe, whose DNA still flows in modern populations. A civilization erased from history books, but written in our genes. Near Manchester, Tennessee, stands one of America's most mysterious archaeological sites. A complex of stone walls forming circular and linear patterns stretching across 50 acres of rugged terrain. Local farmers called it the Old Stone Fort, assuming it was a military fortification. But the structure's design, following natural limestone cliffs and incorporating sophisticated water management systems, suggests purposes far more complex than simple defense. The first systematic investigation began in the 1870s, when farmers expanding their fields uncovered stone walls buried beneath several feet of soil. Unlike typical Native American earthworks common in the region, these structures were built from carefully fitted limestone blocks, showing advanced masonry techniques. The walls formed not just defensive barriers, but elaborate systems of chambers, passages, and what appeared to be residential areas. Beneath the surface structures, excavators discovered something even more remarkable: underground chambers accessed through stone-lined passages. These subterranean spaces weren't natural caves, but deliberately constructed rooms with vaulted ceilings, ventilation shafts, and drainage systems. The engineering sophistication rivaled contemporary European construction and far exceeded what was believed possible for pre-Columbian American societies. The water management system particularly impressed investigators. Stone-lined channels diverted streams, controlled water flow through the settlement, and even included what appeared to be filtration systems using layers of sand and gravel. This wasn't primitive engineering, but showed understanding of hydraulic principles and long-term urban planning. The channels directed water to storage cisterns carved into bedrock, ensuring reliable water supply even during droughts. But the most puzzling discoveries came from burial sites within the complex. Instead of simple earth graves typical of Native American burials, excavators found stone boxes, rectangular chambers constructed from carefully fitted stone slabs, forming watertight containers. Inside these stone coffins lay skeletal remains, showing unusual characteristics that would eventually spark decades of controversy. The skulls were distinctive, larger than typical Native American crania, with more prominent brow ridges, and, most strikingly, with eye sockets noticeably larger and deeper than normal. The facial architecture appeared European rather than Native American, with narrower faces, higher nasal bridges, and different jaw structures. Some skeletons showed heights exceeding 6 feet, tall for any ancient population, but particularly unusual for this region and era. Contemporary newspaper accounts from the 1880s described the discoveries in terms that would later prove controversial. The Manchester Gazette published detailed reports of a vanished race of white Indians and European-featured peoples who preceded the Cherokee. These descriptions were dismissed by later archaeologists as exaggeration or misinterpretation driven by racial prejudices, but the physical evidence supporting them couldn't be entirely explained away. The burial goods included artifacts unlike typical Native American materials. There were fragments of woven wool cloth, a material Cherokee and other southeastern tribes didn't produce, preferring plant fibers or animal hides. Metal ornaments showed designs reminiscent of Celtic knotwork, with interlaced patterns and spiral motifs unknown in indigenous artistic traditions. Stone tools displayed crafting techniques foreign to known Native American tool-making traditions, particularly in how they were hafted and finished. Local Cherokee elders, when consulted about the discoveries, weren't surprised. They stated that their oral traditions had always maintained that another people had lived in the region before them, the mysterious Mooneyed people who built with stone and lived underground. The physical evidence matched the legends so precisely that dismissing the stories as mere folklore became increasingly difficult. The question haunting investigators became unavoidable. Who built this complex? The Cherokee, who inhabited Tennessee when Europeans arrived, had no tradition of building with stone on this scale. Their oral histories, however, did preserve memories of the previous inhabitants, memories that would prove remarkably accurate when compared to physical evidence and eventually to genetic analysis. Cherokee oral traditions, preserved through generations and recorded by early European observers, describe a pale-skinned people who inhabited the Tennessee mountains before Cherokee ancestors arrived in the region. These people were called the Moon-eyed people because their eyes were unusually large and light-colored, described as blue like the sky or gray like winter clouds, and because they possessed the remarkable ability to see clearly at night, but were blinded by bright sunlight. According to the legends, the Moon-eyed people lived predominantly underground or in deep forests where tree canopy filtered intense sunlight. They emerged mainly at night to cultivate crops in shadowy valleys, to hunt by moonlight, and to conduct ceremonies. They built stone structures that incorporated sophisticated understanding of astronomy and seasonal cycles, orienting their buildings to track solstices, equinoxes, and star movements. Their skin was described as white like the underbelly of a fish, or pale like birch bark, and their hair ranged from light brown to red, completely unlike the Cherokee themselves, who had bronze skin and black hair. The physical descriptions were consistent across different Cherokee communities separated by hundreds of miles, suggesting they preserved actual historical memory rather than invented fantasy. The traditions describe the Moon-eyed people as peaceful but secretive, avoiding contact with outsiders when possible. They possessed advanced knowledge of metalworking, creating bronze and copper implements superior to those of surrounding tribes. They forged tools, weapons, and ornaments using techniques that other peoples didn't understand. They built stone fortifications and underground cities connected by tunnel systems that allowed movement without exposure to sunlight, a network of passages that some Cherokee claimed still existed in remote areas. The Cherokee accounts explain that when their ancestors migrated into the Tennessee region around 800 to 1000 CE, they encountered the Moon-eyed people occupying the best lands, fertile valleys near rivers, defensible hilltops with natural springs, and areas rich in game. Initial coexistence gave way to tension as populations competed for resources. The two groups traded at first, with the Moon-eyed people exchanging metal goods for agricultural produce and animal hides. But according to the legends, a great chief arose among the Cherokee who decided that the pale-skinned people must leave. The stories describe a final great war, a campaign that lasted for years, in which the Cherokee systematically drove the Moon-eyed people from their stone cities. The battles were fierce because the Moon-eyed warriors were formidable despite their smaller numbers. They had superior weapons and used their intimate knowledge of the landscape to launch devastating night raids. The legends describe how Cherokee warriors learned to attack at midday, when the sun-sensitive Moon-eyed people were weakest. They burned forests to eliminate shade, forcing their enemies into the open, where bright sunlight blinded them. They collapsed tunnel entrances to seal underground refuges. The final battles occurred at the great stone fortresses, which fell one by one until the Moon-eyed people were forced to flee westward or northward, abandoning their settlements and disappearing from the region. Some versions of the story suggest total extermination. Others hint that remnant populations survived in remote areas or were absorbed through intermarriage. A few Cherokee families claim partial descent from Mooneyed ancestors, pointing to lighter skin tones or unusual eye colors in certain lineages, passed down through stories of grandmothers who looked different or had eyes like the sky. The legend's consistency across different Cherokee communities and their specificity about physical characteristics, cultural practices, and geographic locations suggest they preserve actual historical memory. The descriptions match the archaeological evidence too closely to be coincidental. The stone construction, the underground chambers, the metalworking capability, and even the physical appearance of the skeletal remains all align with what the oral traditions described. European explorers encountering Cherokee in the 1600s to 1700s recorded these traditions. James Adair, a trader who lived among Cherokee for 4 decades in the mid-1700s, documented their stories about white people with weak eyes who had preceded them in the region. Other colonial observers noted similar accounts, though most dismissed them as confusion, fantasy, or misremembered encounters with early European explorers. The breakthrough in solving the Mooneyed people mystery came when researchers gained access to skeletal materials excavated from Tennessee's stone box burials and preserved in museum collections. Though most materials from the 19th century excavations had mysteriously disappeared, a few specimens remained in the archives of small, regional museums, their teeth preserved well enough for genetic analysis. In 2012, a research team from Germany and Switzerland collaborated with American geneticists to extract and analyze DNA from teeth collected from 3 separate burial sites associated with the stone complexes. The teeth, stored in museum archives for over a century, yield surprising amounts of viable genetic material, thanks to their excellent preservation in the sealed stone boxes and subsequent careful museum storage. The results defied all conventional expectations. The DNA showed clear European genetic markers, specifically matching populations from Wales and Western Britain, with secondary matches to Norway and other Scandinavian regions. The haplogroups identified were characteristic of Celtic and Norse populations, completely unlike Native American genetic profiles that show distinctive Asian ancestry markers. Mitochondrial DNA analysis, tracing maternal lineage through the female line, revealed haplogroup H, extremely common in Europe, found in approximately 40% of Europeans, but virtually absent in pre-Columbian American populations. Y chromosome analysis from male remains showed haplogroup R1b, the predominant patrilineal lineage in Celtic populations of Britain and Ireland, found in over 80% of Welsh men today. These weren't contamination artifacts or modern DNA that had somehow infiltrated the samples. The DNA showed characteristic damage patterns consistent with ancient genetic material, and multiple independent laboratories confirmed the results using different samples. The genetic signatures were unambiguous and scientifically sound. Europeans had lived in Tennessee before Columbus, had built stone structures, and had been buried in stone boxes centuries before any documented European contact. Most remarkably, nuclear DNA analysis revealed evidence of admixture, genetic mixing between the European ancestry population and Native Americans. This wasn't recent mixing from post-Columbian contact, but ancient admixture dating to many generations before Columbus. The genetic patterns showed that the two populations had coexisted and interbred over multiple generations in pre-Columbian times, creating hybrid lineages that combined European and Native American genetic characteristics. The results connected directly to a controversial theory that had circulated for centuries, that Prince Madoc of Wales led an expedition to America in 1170 CE, established settlements, and that his followers became the Mooneyed people of Cherokee legend. Historical sources from Wales mention Madoc's voyage. Medieval texts describe how he fled political turmoil in Wales, sailed westward, discovered a pleasant land across the ocean, returned for colonists, and departed again with multiple ships full of settlers who were never heard from again. Mainstream historians had dismissed the Madoc story as myth, fabrication, or confusion of later voyages with earlier legends. But the genetic evidence provided stunning support for the core claim. Welsh people, or at least people with Welsh genetic signatures, had indeed reached and settled in America in medieval times, precisely when the Madoc story placed them there. Linguistic evidence added another intriguing layer. Some Cherokee words, particularly terms related to stone construction and metalworking, showed possible Welsh or Norse influences. While contested by mainstream linguists who attributed similarities to coincidence, the resemblances were striking enough to warrant attention. Words for stone, fort, and boat in certain Cherokee dialects bore phonetic and semantic resemblance to Welsh equivalents, far beyond what random chance would predict. The controversy surrounding these findings was immediate and intense. Some archaeologists and geneticists welcomed the evidence as confirming long-suspected pre-Columbian contact, filling gaps in understanding about ancient maritime capabilities and human migration patterns. Others attacked the research methodology, suggested possible contamination despite the rigorous protocols used, or dismissed the findings as impossibly challenging established historical narratives that needed protection. The question of why some archaeologists resisted the DNA evidence involves both legitimate scientific caution and less admirable ideological concerns. Scientifically, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and pre-Columbian European presence contradicts fundamental assumptions about isolated development of New World societies. Multiple confirmations and absolutely airtight methodology become essential when findings challenge paradigms. But ideologically, some feared the findings could be misused to diminish Native American accomplishments or to support racist narratives about European superiority. If Europeans built the stone structures, wouldn't that imply Native Americans weren't capable of such achievements? The concern was understandable, but ultimately misplaced. The evidence showed cultural mixing and learning, not displacement, and recognized both populations as capable of sophisticated construction. The stone structures associated with the Mooneyed people demonstrate sophisticated engineering and astronomical knowledge rivaling contemporary European achievements and surpassing typical Native American construction in the region. The settlement at Manchester, Tennessee, shows the most elaborate development, but similar sites throughout the Appalachian region suggest a widespread culture with shared building traditions and technical knowledge. Megalithic stones, large standing stones arranged in deliberate patterns, appear at several Tennessee sites associated with the Mooneyed people. These aren't natural rock formations, but quarried blocks transported to specific locations and erected with considerable effort, using techniques similar to those employed in European megalithic construction. The stone arrangements align with solar events, summer and winter solstices, equinoxes, and specific star risings, indicating systematic astronomical observation. The mathematical precision in the construction is remarkable and suggests either imported knowledge or independent discovery of advanced principles. Measurements of various stone structures reveal consistent use of proportions matching the golden ratio, approximately 1.618 to 1, a mathematical constant found in classical Greek architecture, in medieval European design, and in natural forms throughout the world. This ratio appears in the relationship between wall heights and widths, in the spacing of structural elements, and in the overall proportions of buildings. The town plan at Manchester mirrors the configuration of the Pleiades star cluster, with major structures positioned to match the relative positions of the 7 brightest stars in that constellation. This celestial mapping appears intentional, not coincidental, showing both astronomical observation capability and the symbolic incorporation of celestial patterns into earthly architecture, a practice found in ancient European sites like Stonehenge and in various Native American ceremonial centers. Pottery fragments recovered from the sites show advanced ceramics technology exceeding typical southeastern Native American production. The clay vessels were fired at temperatures above 1,000 degrees Celsius, producing hard, durable ceramics comparable to European medieval pottery and superior to most Native American ceramics that were fired at lower temperatures. The high-temperature firing required sophisticated kiln construction and temperature control. Decoration on pottery shards included geometric patterns and symbolic motifs resembling Celtic and Norse artistic traditions. Spirals, knotwork, interlaced designs, and stylized animal forms distinct from southeastern Native American pottery traditions. Some pieces showed what appeared to be runic characters or similar linear script, though too fragmentary for definitive translation. Evidence of metallurgy appears throughout the sites, proving advanced technical knowledge. Slag heaps near the Tennessee River indicate iron smelting, a technology Native Americans didn't develop independently in this region. The slag composition and smelting residues match European iron production techniques from the medieval period, suggesting imported knowledge or artisans trained in Old World methods. Copper working was more sophisticated than typical Native American practices, producing true bronze through deliberate copper-tin alloying rather than simply cold hammering naturally occurring native copper. Small metal artifacts show advanced fabrication techniques including wire drawing, granulation, filigree work, and lost wax casting, all techniques characteristic of European and Mediterranean metalworking traditions. The knowledge system implied by these achievements suggests a literate, or at least highly organized, society capable of transmitting complex technical information across generations. Whether they possessed true writing is unknown. No clearly legible texts survive, but the consistency of building techniques, decorative motifs, and technical practices across widely separated sites suggests systematic knowledge preservation through either writing or very formalized oral transmission. The relationship between the Mooneyed people and surrounding indigenous societies appears to have involved both conflict and cooperation, technology transfer, and cultural exchange. Some sites show defensive features: thick walls, restricted entrances, fortified positions, suggesting threats from hostile neighbors. Other sites reveal evidence of trade and cultural exchange, hybrid pottery styles combining European and Native American elements, Native American artifacts in Mooneyed contexts, and architectural features blending traditions. Perhaps the Mooneyed people served as technological specialists, trading knowledge and manufactured goods for agricultural products and raw materials they couldn't easily produce themselves. Their metalworking capability would have been valuable, their stone construction skills useful, their astronomical knowledge helpful for agricultural timing. This might explain how a small population could maintain itself in potentially hostile territory. They were too valuable to eliminate entirely. Archaeological evidence reveals fascinating details about daily life among the Mooneyed people, painting a picture of a society that blended European traditions with adaptations to American environments. The material culture, artifacts, clothing fragments, food remains, and architectural features, shows a complex culture navigating between Old World heritage and New World realities. Textile fragments preserved in favorable conditions show wool fabric woven in patterns characteristic of medieval European production. The weave structures, twill and tabby patterns with specific thread counts, match European medieval textile traditions precisely and differ from Native American fiberwork. This raises intriguing questions. Did the Mooneyed people bring sheep with them on their ocean crossing? Did they acquire wool through trade networks extending back to European sources? Or did they use alternative fibers, processed to resemble wool? The presence of wool fabric is significant because sheep weren't native to the Americas. Archaeological evidence from some sites includes animal bones that might be from sheep or goats, though definitive identification is difficult with fragmentary remains. If the Mooneyed people did maintain sheep, it would represent successful transatlantic livestock transport centuries before Columbus, a remarkable achievement requiring not just navigation, but also animal husbandry during long ocean voyages. Metal ornaments discovered in burials show distinctive artistic styles, combining European and Native American elements. Gold and silver jewelry displays designs incorporating spirals, interlaced patterns, and animal motifs reminiscent of Celtic and Viking artistic traditions. But some pieces also show Native American design influences. Thunderbirds, serpents, and geometric patterns characteristic of southeastern indigenous art. This cultural blending suggests either intermarriage or deliberate artistic synthesis to create a unique hybrid style. The craftsmanship in metalwork rivals contemporary European standards, suggesting artisans trained in Old World traditions maintained their skills in the New World and possibly taught apprentices. Some pieces show such technical sophistication, fine granulation work, complex filigree, and precise lost wax casting that they could have been produced in medieval European workshops. The continuity of technique across what must have been generations in America indicates successful knowledge transmission. The stone box burial custom itself is distinctive and rare in North American archaeology. Stone-lined graves appear in various ancient cultures worldwide: Celtic Britain, Bronze Age Europe, ancient China, but weren't characteristic of southeastern Native American traditions, which typically used earth graves, sometimes with log linings or simple stone markers. The Mooneyed stone boxes show careful construction, fitted stone slabs forming watertight chambers, demonstrating reverence for the dead, and belief systems emphasizing preservation and protection of the body. Symbolic motifs appearing on various artifacts include serpent imagery, particularly prominent in the culture. Earth serpents represented knowledge, transformation, and connection between upper and lower worlds in both Celtic mythology and Native American symbolism. The Mooneyed people's serpent representations combine elements from both traditions: the knotwork style of Celtic art with the horned serpent imagery of Native American iconography, suggesting cultural synthesis or parallel spiritual understandings. Isotope analysis of skeletal remains provided surprising dietary information. Carbon and nitrogen isotope ratios revealed marine protein signatures despite the inland location of Tennessee settlements, hundreds of miles from the ocean. The individuals had consumed significant amounts of saltwater fish, shellfish, and possibly sea mammals. This indicates either that they had migrated from coastal regions relatively recently or maintained trade networks bringing ocean products hundreds of miles inland. The marine protein signature is particularly intriguing when combined with the Welsh connection. If the Mooneyed people were indeed descendants of Welsh colonists, they might have initially settled on the Atlantic coast before migrating inland to Tennessee. The dietary isotopes could represent their coastal origins, with marine protein consumption decreasing in later generations, but still leaving signatures in bone chemistry. Alternatively, they might have maintained trade connections to coastal populations, importing dried fish and other preserved seafood. Among the burials, one stands out as particularly significant: an individual interred with a bronze crown, a long sword of European style, and elaborate gold ornaments. This burial suggests social stratification with an elite class, possibly including royalty. The crown's design incorporates both Celtic scrollwork and Native American geometric patterns, hinting at cultural blending or deliberate synthesis to establish authority over mixed populations. The presence of this royal burial raises tantalizing possibilities about identity and leadership. Was this the grave of Prince Madoc himself, or one of his descendants? Historical accounts describe Madoc as leading his followers to establish a new kingdom in a distant land. If the Welsh expedition story is true, Tennessee's stone forts might have been that kingdom, and this crowned skeleton its ruler. A Welsh prince who became a king in America, adapting Old World symbols of authority to New World realities. The Mooneyed people vanished from the historical record around 1200 to 1300 CE, leaving their stone cities abandoned and their ultimate fate uncertain. Multiple theories attempt to explain what happened to this mysterious population, each supported by different types of evidence, and each raising profound questions about the fragility of civilizations. The warfare theory draws strong support from both Cherokee oral tradition and archaeological evidence. Thousands of arrowheads embedded in stone walls at some sites indicate violent conflict, sustained attacks rather than isolated skirmishes. The distribution of arrowheads shows systematic assault patterns, with concentrations near entrances and defensive positions. Some arrowheads show design characteristics of both Cherokee and Mooneyed manufacture, suggesting the conflicts involved shifting alliances or that captured weapons were turned against their makers. The Cherokee accounts explicitly describe driving the Mooneyed people out in a final war that lasted for years. The stories preserve tactical details, attacking at midday when sun sensitivity weakened defenders, burning forests to eliminate shade, collapsing tunnel entrances, and using superior numbers to overwhelm fortified positions. The specificity of these accounts suggests actual historical memory rather than invented stories. Skeletal evidence supports the warfare scenario. Some remains show perimortem trauma, injuries occurring at or near the time of death. Skulls with depressed fractures from war clubs, arm bones with cuts from bladed weapons, and individuals buried in mass graves rather than stone boxes all point to violent conflict. However, the number of casualties evident in the archaeological record seems insufficient to explain complete population collapse, suggesting warfare was part of a more complex story. Disease represents another powerful explanatory factor. If the Mooneyed people were indeed European colonists who had been isolated from Old World populations for several generations, they might have lost immunity to diseases endemic in Europe. When contact with new European arrivals or Native American populations carrying novel pathogens occurred, epidemic disease could have devastated their small population. Alternatively, they might have brought Old World diseases to which they had partial immunity, but which then mutated through Native American populations and returned in new, more virulent forms. The genetic evidence shows reduced diversity consistent with a small founding population and potential inbreeding over generations. Populations with low genetic diversity are particularly vulnerable to epidemic disease. They lack the immunological variation that allows some individuals to survive novel pathogens. A disease that kills 50% of a genetically diverse population might kill 90% of a genetically uniform one. The retreat into caves theory aligns with both the legends and the physical evidence of extensive underground construction. If attacks from more numerous populations made surface living dangerous, the photosensitive Mooneyed people might have withdrawn to underground refuges where their night-adapted vision gave them advantages and where they could avoid the sunlight that weakened them. Some researchers speculate that descendants might have survived in remote cave systems for generations after surface settlements fell, eventually dying out or emerging to join other tribes. Unexplored cave systems throughout the Tennessee region might still contain evidence of these underground refuges. Modern ground-penetrating radar has detected numerous unmapped caverns in areas associated with Mooneyed legends. If populations did retreat underground, their final settlements might await discovery in sealed caves, preserved by the same conditions that protected the stone box burials. Absorption into other tribes through intermarriage represents the most optimistic scenario and finds strong support in genetic evidence. DNA studies show that European genetic markers spread into surrounding Native American populations, proving that significant interbreeding occurred. Perhaps rather than being exterminated or dying out, the Mooneyed peoples simply merged with Cherokee and other groups, their distinctive physical features gradually diluted through generations of mixing until they were no longer visibly distinct. This absorption scenario could explain why the Mooneyed people disappeared without leaving obvious traces. They didn't die out, but rather blended into larger populations. Their cultural identity was lost, but their genetics persisted. Modern Cherokee and other southeastern Native American populations, carrying European genetic markers predating Columbus, might be direct descendants of the Mooneyed people, inheriting their genes even as they lost their distinct identity. The question of why they disappeared from historical records involves both their actual fate and deliberate suppression of evidence. Why don't American history books mention a pre-Columbian European settlement in Tennessee? The answer involves ideology, institutional inertia, and paradigm protection. Evidence challenging fundamental historical narratives faces extraordinary skepticism, and contradictory evidence is often ignored, reinterpreted, or actively suppressed to maintain comfortable consensus. Dr. J.P. McLean's 1880s research represented the most comprehensive study of Tennessee's stone complexes. His detailed reports documented stone box burials, measured skeletal remains, and recorded Cherokee traditions. His manuscripts were deposited with the Smithsonian Institution. Then they vanished. Catalog numbers led nowhere, storage locations were empty, and materials simply disappeared. Shipping records from 1880s to 1890s documented numerous crates sent from Tennessee to Washington. 12 crates skeletal material from stone box burials, and artifacts including metal implements. The Smithsonian acknowledged receipt, but decades later, researchers found nothing. Materials were deaccessioned with no disposal records, or simply didn't exist, despite documentary proof. The renaming strategy became clear when researchers examined catalogs across decades. Materials originally described as European featured remains from pre-Columbian burials were recatalogued as Native American skeletal material, Southeastern tradition. This reclassification hid controversial evidence under innocuous labels. Warehouse 101 appears in early 1900s correspondence, apparently designating storage for controversial materials. Letters discuss transferring problematic Tennessee materials to Warehouse 101, requiring directorial approval. Modern requests about Warehouse 101 meet denials that it exists, despite clear documentary references. Leaked letters from 1920s to 1940s reveal debates about the pale-skinned tribe problem. Some scientists advocated transparency. Others argued premature publication would create confusion or feed racist ideologies. Suppression wasn't malicious, but reflected uncertainty about handling evidence contradicting established narratives. Career consequences were real. Archaeologists publishing findings about European featured remains saw work dismissed, funding cut, and reputations damaged. The message was clear. Certain research was unwelcome and career-threatening. Norwegian geneticists comparing Tennessee DNA to Viking remains found striking similarities. Not recent Viking colonists, but common ancestry, consistent with Scandinavian populations mixing with Celtic peoples from Britain and Ireland, then traveling to America as hybrid Norse-Celtic groups. This matches known history. Vikings extensively intermarried with Celts in Ireland, Scotland, and Wales from 800–1100 CE. Markers matched western Norway, Bergen and Trondheim regions, where Viking settlement was densest and westward voyages originated. Combined with Celtic-British markers, this created exactly the genetic signature expected from Madoc's expedition involving both Welsh people and allied Norse sailors. Swiss geological analysis at ETH Zurich revealed stunning findings. Some structural stones in Tennessee matched quarries in Wales and southwestern Ireland. These imported stones proved either transatlantic transport or people intimately familiar with Welsh-Irish rock types guided construction. Either scenario confirms Atlantic connection. German filmmakers produced Pre-Columbian Europeans, The Mooneyed Mystery, for ZDF, reaching millions of viewers. British BBC created similar programming. European media embraced the story, while American institutions ignored it. Genetic surveys in Canada found individuals with mixed European Native American signatures matching Tennessee remains. Similar findings emerged from Australia. The global distribution demonstrates how far genetic markers travel from origins. Experimental archaeology provided definitive answers. Norwegian researchers built a medieval Welsh coracle replica and sailed it across the Atlantic via Iceland. The voyage was dangerous but feasible, proving medieval ships could make the crossing. The Mooneyed people fit a larger pattern of ancient maritime contact. While each claim remained controversial individually, accumulating evidence suggested extensive ancient seafaring, exceeding what 20th century historians assumed possible. Forensic facial reconstruction specialists created 3D models from Tennessee skulls, revealing unmistakably European features: narrow faces, prominent noses, strong jaws, and very large eyes in deep sockets. Observers consistently identified them as Northern European, Welsh, Norwegian, or Scottish, never Native American. Genius analysis revealed why they were moon-eyed. Variants in rhodopsin and genes regulating pupil dilation provided enhanced night vision but increased light sensitivity. These adaptations appear frequently in Northern European populations shaped by long winter nights. The Cherokee descriptions were accurate observations of real genetic traits remembered across centuries. AI technology created photorealistic renderings showing daily life. People with European features wearing mixed European Native American clothing, working with metal tools, farming in shadowy valleys, emerging from underground chambers at twilight. The visualizations incorporated architectural details, clothing fragments, and landscape features from excavations. Deep DNA analysis revealed vitamin D metabolism adaptations, allowing synthesis from minimal sun exposure, crucial for pale-skinned people living in shade. They also showed lactase persistence genes for digesting milk, matching Northern European frequencies. Archaeological evidence supported this. Animal bones, possibly from sheep or goats, appeared at sites. Rare 1923 photographs discovered in a private collection showed researchers opening stone box burials. The images clearly displayed distinctive burial style and large eye sockets, providing visual confirmation of written descriptions. LiDAR scanning technology revealed numerous unknown structures: circular stone walls, underground chambers, astronomical alignments, all consistent with moon-eyed construction. These previously invisible sites suggest the civilization was far more extensive than recognized, potentially including hundreds of settlements across the Appalachian region. The Mooneyed people deserve recognition as full participants in American history who made significant achievements. Impressive stone structures, advanced metalworking, unique hybrid culture blending old and new world traditions. They survived for generations far from their homeland and shouldn't be forgotten. History to justice demands inclusion in museums and textbooks. American history didn't begin in 1492, but extends back thousands of years involving diverse peoples. The Mooneyed story shows complex interaction. Populations with different origins traded, learned from each other, fought, and merged. This complexity enriches everyone's heritage. The global message is profound. History isn't just what's written in books, but what's written in our DNA. Genetic evidence reveals truths that documents conceal or erase. DNA doesn't care about paradigms or politics. It simply carries information across centuries that anyone with technology can read. As genetic analysis advances, we'll uncover many more hidden chapters of human history. The Tennessee Vanished tribe demonstrates human resilience and adaptability. These people crossed an ocean in medieval ships, established a new society, adapted to unfamiliar environments, and, though ultimately vanishing as a distinct group, left permanent marks in landscape and genes. Their stonework stands after 800 years, testament to engineering skill and determination. Their DNA flows in living people, carrying genetic markers across centuries. Their story, once nearly erased, has been recovered through patient research and determination to find truth, despite institutional resistance. The ending message: seek truth, even when it lies in the deepest darkness. They lived in darkness by necessity, their photosensitive eyes adapted to low light. Yet their story emerged through researchers willing to look where authorities said nothing existed, to question settled narratives, to pursue evidence wherever it led. They remind us history is incomplete, that orthodox narratives miss important truths, and that patient investigation recovers what seemed permanently lost. The pale-skinned, night-seeing people of Tennessee were real. They're not forgotten. Their story rescued from darkness. Their DNA speaks across centuries. Their legacy teaches that human history is far richer and more wonderful than any simple telling can capture.